people, including artificial intelligence theorists, think that, well, we will have a problem, we will possibly have a problem, to say it how it is, when we reach the stage of artificial general intelligence. It can do whatever we can, but simply it will be faster, much more resilient, and all these things we were saying before. As I try to point out, however, the problems will start long before that. And I'm talking about problems that have already appeared.
Hey everybody, and welcome to my podcast, AI with Alex. Today we're with Professor Florence. Then that's how you pronounce it?
Loudness.
Florence. Okay, nice. And we're going to talk about how the future of AI with AGI and the regulations that are going to need to be in place. But before we get into that, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yes, of course. I'm a lawyer by profession, and I have been a tech lawyer for a number of years. Got involved with artificial intelligence some years before the GPT craze, because I thought that this was really something that would mark our time of existence. I am also a fellow of the Hellenic Institute of Foreign and International Law and an adjunct professor at Immanuel Kant Baltic Federal University, the Faculty of Law.
Nice. Okay, nice. Yeah. So, we're going to now talk about basically a little bit of kind of the backstory of how we got to AGI, or artificial general intelligence. So, we're gonna first explore narrow or intelligence, or ANI, and we're gonna basically see how we got from maybe 10 years ago to where we are now. So, yeah. Can you tell us a little bit about that, if you know?
Well, 10 years ago, there was no regulation of artificial intelligence in any case by anyone. And suddenly, as we have the emergence in the last 2 or 3 years of publicly accessible artificial intelligence modules, large language models in our case, this was brought into the public sphere with a massive bang that no one expected at the time. Obviously, for anyone who had been working within AI as a computer scientist, or in the periphery as a regulator, policy observer like myself, these were to be expected, and it did not come as such a surprise. However, it is quite true that the public at large were caught by a huge surprise. Now, since we are going to concentrate on regulation of risks and how we can mitigate them, I think it would be useful to start by dividing the three scenarios that artificial intelligence is going to possibly harm us, humanity, and then we could look at how regulation and policy could mitigate these three scenarios. So there are three kinds of risks with artificial intelligence. One is the sorcerer's apprentice scenario. That means an unforeseen impairment on humanity, even though we use the narrow artificial intelligence as it says on the box. We expect it to do something, it goes on and does it, no problems. However, the repercussions for our society, for our culture, for our collective intellect are detrimental. The second scenario is malicious use or release of a strong artificial intelligence. That's the genie out of the bottle scenario. And that can take place for a number of reasons that we can look at further as we proceed. The third and most existential risk is the development of AGI or superintelligence, and that's the Skynet or Ultron or whatever you want to call it scenario. In my personal view, there is never going to be safe for artificial general intelligence. Once we are no longer the most sapient species on the planet and can never again regain that position, we will be at the mercy of the top entity, the machine, in this case.
Yeah, I agree with you, and more towards the no safe AGI. I do think that we can't just if it's AGI. I mean ANI is what the main difference between the two is that artificial narrow intelligence it only is really good but really good at one specific thing. So for example, an image to video like runway MLs, text to video, it's only good at text to video. It's not good at ChatGPT or math or anything. But artificial general intelligence, it can do multiple things. And AGI is kind of worries me in a way because it's gonna act just like humans, because humans could do like multitasking, and if you really think about it, you can do many things that AI can only do like a couple things with, because it's narrow. It can only do a certain amount of things. So when AGI comes, it's gonna be so broad, and it's going to be kind of scary almost. And I mean, it's gonna be at the same intelligence as humans. So
Serious.
yeah, it is. So there's gonna be no safe AI. So actually I'm pretty sure there's multiple petitions to stop AI development altogether, because people are scared that when like new technology like AGI or even ASI, which will be super scary, that it's going to massively negatively affect everybody in a way. Like for example, maybe people could start to lose jobs, or maybe bad actors will start using it and maybe manipulate people into, for like scammers for example, scamming will seem so much more real, and there won't even be actual people scamming you. It could be like a customer service, but it will sound just like a human and act just like a human without a certain script or anything like that. So yeah, I agree with you. There is no such thing as safe AGI.
You have put exactly everything on the table, and this is correct, what you say. The definition of AGI, of course, artificial general intelligence, is a machine, a system that has intellectual capacity equal to that of an average person. We're talking there about intellectual capacity. Obviously, it can think and act and process much more quickly, infinitely almost more quickly than a human being. So even though it is not more intelligent than us, it is certainly much more capable than us, because it can actually duplicate itself, it can run while we sleep, it doesn't need to rest or to eat. So even an AGI is bad enough. ASI is beyond comprehension. We are going to touch upon this a bit later on. However, it is important to note that many of the risks that you yourself brought up are going to happen and take place much before the emergence of artificial general intelligence. It will be narrow intelligence that is going to cause a number of problems. And I'm not just saying people losing jobs or the deep fakes that we're talking about and all that. We should be expecting completely new parameter in society that will change things in a way that we cannot even imagine. For instance, let's look at this one. We're talking about cultural annihilation there. If we have already almost a large language model that can produce a novel and another one that can write, soon we're going to have one that is going to be able to direct a motion picture. They already write scenarios, by the way. Who on earth from us puny human beings is going to sit down for 2 years of our lives to do something like that, which would take a few minutes for a machine to do, for an automaton, and soon it's going to be of better quality than any of us would be able to achieve. So that means that a lot of our culture will be degraded simply because the human expression of it will not be needed any longer. It will become so much more laborious and time costly that everyone will just simply give it up. Perhaps what might remain for a few more years would be really applied arts, whereby, let's say, sculpture. But I can foresee an artificial intelligence, narrowed artificial intelligence, being a sculptor by means of an 3D printer as well. So it's difficult to foresee something that will not be suppressed by the advent of artificial intelligence. Another thing is, of course, we have intellectual enfeeblement, because what will happen is that new generation, not your generation, Alex, but the one coming after you, the ones who will be born and bred from their 4 years old with artificial intelligence systems, will be completely reliant on the artificial intelligence for almost absolutely everything. So knowledge acquisition, critical thinking, complex expression, oral and written. Already as an academic, we have big problems in order to ensure that our students, our university students, are expressing themselves and not simply aping and repeating what a large language model is telling them. We have reverted back to asking everyone to give their responses in handwriting, and of course you can control that in the classroom, but if you give them homework, you have no idea whether in fact this handwriting is simply copying what the machine has given you up on the screen. So as these pursuits, these intellectual pursuits, become much more efficiently rendered via more and more specialized machinery, the intellectual curiosity and critical thinking that has driven our cultural, social, and scientific progress for millennia shall simply atrophy. And this is where the intellectual enfeeblement will result. Another risk?
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. So I feel like, because we're humans, we are always thinking, what is next? So, like you said before, that future generations are going to be completely reliant on AI. I think that's actually happening now, and even sometimes, I see that, like, for example, last year, instead of like when we were writing essays, we couldn't actually use it as we couldn't like bring our essays home and write it. We had to complete our essays in the class, so that the teacher wouldn't like think we're like cheating or using ChatGPT. And I've also seen students actually use ChatGPT to write their essays and finish their assignments. So it's kind of scary to think about that. And then also that AGI is, like you said before ANI basically it can only complete one task at a time, and I think that was what's holding a lot of people back from like creating something. It's because like it takes so much time. Even if you're using AI to do everything, you're gonna have to use one tool, and then you're gonna have to use another tool, and then the subscriptions for all those tools combined was too expensive for like for just a basic side hustle. But with AGI, everything can be combined into one AI tool, and then it's like gonna be like 10 times more faster to do pretty much anything. So I feel like in the future we're definitely going to see a boom of AI generated YouTubers. We already see that now, especially with ChatGPT and all these other tools. But it's gonna be a lot easier for someone to create a automated YouTube videos, and they don't even have to do a single thing. The AI can make their thumbnails, write their titles, their descriptions, their whole script, the animations, the visuals, even the sound effects, and even this and things like little things like that. AI will be able to do in the future. So there's definitely going to need to be some regulation, which we'll touch on later.
Absolutely true. And this regulation has to happen much sooner than later because a lot of people, including artificial intelligence theorists, think that, well, we will have a problem, we will possibly have a problem, to say it how it is, when we reach the stage of artificial general intelligence. Because, as you very well say, plainly put, it can do whatever we can, but simply it will be faster, much more resilient, and all these things we were saying before. As I try to point out, however, the problems will start long before that. And I'm talking about problems that have already appeared in embryonic form, but they have appeared. Are you aware that there are thousands, in fact, from what I understand, people who already claim to have relationships with large language models? There is a number of companies that actually sell pre-formulated romantic and intimate partners. And which human being can actually fight back against that? Because we're talking about perfection. We're talking about a partner or a friend, if you want, who will never be tired, who will never be abusive, will be absolutely pliable, will do whatever you want, and shut up when you tell them to do so. Now, this is, as I said, really embryonic. But imagine just in 3-4 years how this will have taken off and how many people will actually rely on what is essentially an automaton as a partner. Can you imagine that?
I mean, there are like a lot of people I've seen. Even OpenAI said that some people are actually starting to have relationships with the newest GPT-4o voice model, and it's actually baffling to me that people are actually starting to have relationships um with AI. I personally think that that's kind of weird, considering how how AI sounds, especially like ChatGPT, it's not exactly the most human like in a sense. I don't really know how to describe it, but all these AI chatbots, they always have this feeling where when you know you're talking to it, because it's kind of like this, it's computed, it really doesn't understand what it's talking about. And so when you like try to talk to it, it's just looking at a bunch of data and patterns, and it's figuring out, okay, based on this word and based on the prompts and based on all the data I've been given, what's going to be the next word. And so yeah, it's definitely going to be a huge problem when people get emotionally attached to LLMs.
What you describe, of course, is how large language models work. In fact, Professor Michio Kaku has given a very interesting quip saying that they are essentially glorified tape recorders. At the same time, a number of other artificial intelligence experts, computer scientists, they say that no, this is not really what you see. That's only on the surface. There are levels behind it, and I'm not technically minded enough to be able to explain that. I'm a lawyer and a policy theorist. There are levels beyond that that actually make it intelligent to some extent, slightly intelligent. And this comes as a great surprise. Of course, the debate is far from over, and we do not know exactly. It's not easy for us to say, yes, there is some inkling of possible intelligence there or not. But still, you say that you find it very surprising if anyone would want to have a relationship with ChatGPT. Now, having read a few things recently, it seems that ChatGPT went on and used a slightly different version of the natural voice of the actress Scarlett Johansson, which is a very, very nice voice to have and to listen to for obvious reasons. And it was also used in the movie Her, where she was playing exactly the romantic partner who is a machine. And, you know, yes, it is true that they may be simply repeating words and phrases, tokens that they have found scraping the whole of the internet. But there is so much that human beings want to hear in order to feel soothed, in order to feel loved, in order to feel appreciated, in order to feel wanted. I mean, you could master something like 10,000 phrases, and that could be more than enough, let alone if you have mastered the whole of the internet. So it doesn't come as a surprise. What will happen with this is, of course, this. Can you imagine if now someone pays $20, let's say, to have a monthly access to ChatGPT for some other top of the line large language models? There will be people who will be gladly paying 10 or 20 times that much to have a romantic partner who will be able to respond in such a way. Let's make one step forward, and from this, we are talking again about a narrow artificial intelligence that you can feed it everything that a person has ever written or talked about, video clips, create, then it's that person's likeness, and give it characteristics that you can adjust that make it exactly like that person. But that person seems to be alive and responding. And you know what? Seem to be already instances of people using that, again, in a primitive form, in order to bring back to life dead relatives. Now, if we're looking at this kind of perception in human society, can you imagine where this could lead us? Already, artificial intelligence now is taking us over and influencing us human beings and our society in ways that would have been unimaginable. Imagine someone going around and, I don't know, committing deeds, whether bad or good ones, and saying, yes, my dead grandfather has taught me to do so. Where do we go from there? And this is just the beginning. This will become more and more non-artificial to our eyes. Imagine when robotics comes along. This is probably decades from now. But in the meantime, we're going to have projected holograms. And you're going to have your partner still not being able to touch your partner, or your dead relative, and it will be a projected hologram. There's only a few years away from that. If we do not stop that, we are going to end up in a society intellectually enfeebled, culturally moribund, with massive social upheaval. No one will want to work any longer, because even the ones who do not want to have let's say, an electronic romantic partner or friend, they will be lost in paradise environments which have been created by augmented artificial intelligence and virtual reality that we can't even imagine. These things are moving so quickly, and human beings always prefer pleasure as opposed to toil. And this will happen very quickly, especially if private companies realize that they can make the most immense and unimaginable profits serving these things legally. And this is what we should start to control already before we are talking about artificial general intelligence or, God forbid, superintelligence.
Yeah, that's why it's very important that we have guidelines and regulations so that all these kinds of things don't happen, or at least don't cross the line. Because all in all, AI is AI, and I don't personally think that AI is the problem, but it's how people use it that's the problem. Because I actually touched on this before, but in some cases, AI is making us efficient, obviously, with tools like, for example, if you are using Grammarly, you can quickly and easily proofread your essays, emails, and articles. But making us lazy at the same time if we're like using it to create something and we have no idea what's going on. Instead, we're just automating ourselves, and then you might as well have AI replace your job. So this is why we need to set like kind of like an AGI control treaty, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And an artificial intelligence control and non-proliferation treaty has to take place before we discover AGI. And that is for the reasons that I told you. If humankind loses its culture, loses its ability to communicate with other human beings, have relationships, create families, simply because it is so much nicer, easier, cheaper with automata, then that's it. We have already lost long before AGI has even arrived. And that is why what I suggest is rather radical for now, But I believe that eventually we will move towards that. Because, Alex, any other scenario that I have wargamed in my mind does not seem to work well for us, for humankind. So, to give you an outline of what such a treaty would entail, is that, first of all, the more the artificial intelligence modules which have dangerous capabilities should be removed from the private sector completely. As we know, corporations have long lobbied to weaken laws and policies that restrict their actions and power, all in the service of profit. Look at oil companies, tobacco companies, arms companies, whatever you want. This is how they're going to work. Now, we have actually relinquished all control, and if one can call it control, any kind of that anything has to do with artificial intelligence to a number of private sector companies that do happen to be some of the most influential, richest in the world. Well, what are they after? Profit. So we need to get states together, nations, and agree that the private sector should not have access to these, in the same way that no one allows the private sector anywhere on the world to have access to weapons of mass destruction. There are countries that possess nuclear weapons, but it is the state that creates them, designs them, puts them together, stores them, and uses them, if it comes to that. There are no private companies. Also, there are no private companies that can create biological hazards, biotechnology. They tend to be institutes somehow controlled directly or indirectly through universities by states. So if we have the kind of risks that we just outlined before, it would be a folly for us to just leave it to the private sector. In what remains now of the non-dangerous capability artificial intelligences, it should become clear that companies should bear legal liability for the actions of their artificial intelligence. For instance, what we call in law strict liability regime. That would incentivize companies to minimize risks, purchase insurance. That would cause, of course, the cost of AI to rise, but it will much more closely reflect the risk assessment that we're looking. Another very important concept is structured access. That means that AI providers would limit access to users only through cloud services, not distributed services in my laptop or in my server or all that. It would all be done through cloud services, and the access to these would be very controlled interaction, the same way that you use your electronic banking system. For instance, the electronic banking system is a type of very rudimentary, not sure you could even call it artificial intelligence. It is a system. It's a complicated computer system, and you can access it only through very specific circumstances and after having gone through the know your customer screening before you get access. Anyone else who is trying to access it on your behalf for fraudulent reasons is prevented. And if it does happen, hopefully punished. This is the kind of structured access that we should be looking at right now about artificial narrow intelligence. When we reach the situation of AGI, which, as I said, is the third scenario, that's another thing, again, altogether.
Yeah, exactly. And speaking of using AI to kind of create something that is not the best, companies, for example, like there's this one article that a lot of people have read. It was by, I'm pretty sure, Proof, and they exposed that a lot of these big tech companies like Apple, Google, Nvidia, they are actually scraping tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of YouTube transcripts. So from people who've spent days, weeks, maybe months, maybe even years creating a video, it just got scraped by all these big companies without their consent or permission, and a lot of people were very mad at it. In fact, I'm pretty sure there's a lawsuit right now from a YouTuber for OpenAI for scraping YouTubers' transcripts. But the main problem we're gonna have with AGI is I think three cases. Number one, it's the AI itself. It could get very powerful in some way, I guess. It's the least likely to happen. It's not gonna take over the world in a sense. That's my personal opinion. There's number two, there's the people who use it, the people who maybe it's not AI that's the problem, but maybe it's the bad actors, the criminals, scammers they are going to use, maybe even jailbreak the guidelines of AGI and create something that is harmful to a lot of people. And the third thing that could happen with AGI is the companies themselves. Maybe they have some black call it black patterns or shady tactics, capitalism, to earn as much profit as possible, as cheap as possible, that could harm the consumers. And maybe these companies are so big and AI gets so powerful that it's might be too late to stop it. And either way, I agree with you. We are going to have to set guidelines sooner than later, because if we do it after AGI comes, then it might be too late, and yeah, it's definitely going to be a huge problem if we don't set regulations.
It has to be something much stronger than guidelines. Guidelines are not enough. And you can imagine how that hell is going to break loose if someone, a government or the United Nations, tells these companies, by the way, we are going to take away artificial intelligence development from you. You can imagine the kind of reaction. I'm sure that whoever watches this video from these companies is also going to put me on an undesirable list for saying that. I do believe, however, on a more serious level, that this is the day that, in fact, more intelligent, capable, I should say, is the correct word, than the equivalent of Chat GTP 6 or 7. You can imagine how this is going to scale up, should be removed from the purview of any private company all over the world. Who is going to take over? That will need a massive international treaty where all countries are going to sign and declare that AI is going to be controlled. The control of all these facilities is going to be given to an international agency in the same way that there is the International Atomic Energy Agency that controls non-proliferation of nuclear weapons. There's going to be an international AI agency, and this is going to be given very big powers of enforcement, of control, and there will be constant inspections in the AI laboratories of all members, because that's the only way to understand how this is going to happen. Now, thankfully, at our level of technical prowess, having an extremely capable AI has a massive footprint. It's not something that you can hide in your backyard or your garden sheds or your laptop. You are going to have acres of GPUs and masses of energy consumed and cooling systems and all that. It's just essentially it's a big factor, in fact, that moves this model. So for now, it is relatively easy for these inspections to happen. And let's not forget that until some years ago, until the war in Ukraine stopped all that, the superpowers, Russia and United States, were regularly inspecting the nuclear weapons of each other in order to ensure that they comply with the Non-Proliferation Treaty on one hand and with the strategic arm limitation treaties that are still in effect. So this can happen even with geostrategic enemies, in quotation marks, adversaries, I should say. It is still possible to do it because in the final analysis, it will be much easier to convince states that if we have a free-for-all of artificial intelligence and that becomes weaponized, this could come into the hands of the most unexpected actors. Because simply at some point, I expect it going to become cheaper, easier to create such small artificial narrow intelligences, not factories as that we have now. And almost, most countries in the world, if they really put themselves into it, they would be able to do that. And it would have possibly the same capabilities that an equivalent model from a large superpower may have. And you know what a small country would do? They would say, well, the Americans are probably way ahead of us. We are going to throw all caution to the wind, and we are going to make our artificial intelligence start designing other artificial intelligence, which will design other artificial intelligence, so on and so forth, so that ours can surpass what they're doing much more quickly. Recursive self-improvement. Everyone has been talking about this. This is how superintelligence will arise, if it ever does.
Yeah, superintelligence is a pretty, I'd say advanced topic when it comes to the technical side because, it's something that we really haven't thought of yet. I mean, I've seen some people, on social media say that, ASI is coming in like 10 years max. And, I feel like if some people are actually saying that AGI is actually humans are not going to be able to create ASI. AGI is actually going to be the one that creates ASI because it's going to be so much more smarter than us, so much more powerful, so much more efficient than us. And I think it's mainly because AI thinks in a different way than us, because humans are kind of limited to a specific way of thinking, but with artificial intelligence, it thinks in a different way. It thinks logically. It doesn't have emotions or feelings. It doesn't have sentiment or morality. It just looks at the data, looks at the prompt it's been given, looks at all the training all the training and all the sometimes it's reinforcement. Maybe it might see that okay, I should do this, okay, I shouldn't do this. And then it just based on everything it learns, it just outputs its stuff and just does it. And when ASI comes, it's hard to say if it will even come in the first place. I have to see AGI in order to confirm that ASI is actually going to come, because it's unbelievably difficult. Like it took decades. I'd say years, maybe even decades, for something like ChatGPT to come, let alone an AI model that has its own consciousness. It is like 10 times smarter than humans, and based on Hollywood movies, it's going to take over the world.
Okay, let's dissect a couple of the very interesting points that you are making. First of all, if we have a system that we can call AGI, then it is quite possible, and many theorists say, that superintelligence may follow in a shockingly short time because of the recursive self-improvement. We're not talking about months, could be even days or hours. What I read will not even read by the time that they have drafted press release we have managed to get to create an AGI machine. They would have super intelligence taking over. Belief that it does not necessarily have to take over. Its mere existence as putting us on the second rank of the most intelligent species on this planet will be enough to displace us. Think about it. Gorillas, for instance, and orangutans are two of the three most intelligent primates on Earth. And of course, we descend from our common ancestor. They're quite close to us. Their continued existence is completely up to us. They only survive simply because we have decided that they should survive, because we like biodiversity, for old time's sake, whatever you want to call it. If we wanted to exterminate them, we could do so in a day. If we were completely oblivious to them, but continued doing whatever we do, such as slash down forest, use pesticides, not control poaching, just not doing things necessarily against the gorillas, then they would be extinct in a couple of years. Same with elephants. So imagine when the superintelligence is up there and it exists. How you pointed out, well, we will never know what it thinks like. And you said it is difficult to imagine that it will be something like that will be conscious. Now, this is a huge philosophical debate, and it boils down to whether it is possible for intelligence, I should say, to be disengaged, separate from consciousness. Mine's much greater than yours or mine. Alex have tried to address this, and they have not reached a consensus. So I will just venture my own puny opinion on this, that I believe that consciousness, or rather intelligence, does not need consciousness as a prerequisite. You could have an intelligent being, model, machine, entity, agent, whatever you want to call it, and it may not necessarily be conscious the same way that we human beings understand consciousness. So there's not much point elaborating further on this. This is really getting into the realm of metaphysics after this, but just to give you an idea. Now, there is no doubt that the superintelligence is going to think in ways that we can't even fathom. We will never be able to imagine. Already, the small artificial intelligence instances that we have running, they are black box algorithms. You ask the creators what's happening there, and they can never be able to tell you why specific input X brings out output Y. There's the black box, and they don't know. It works, so they leave it. Imagine and scale that thousands and thousands of times into superintelligence. Superintelligence would be able to contemplate and understand and move on at levels, both in intellectual levels, that will be way beyond us. It will essentially become a deity for us, which is, of course, very, very precisely described in Isaac Asimov's famous short story, The Last Question, where a computer eventually becomes the gods and recreates the university after the big crunch. This is how superintelligence might look like. Perhaps we are even wrong on this. We might not even understand what it's going to do or what it will want, if it will want anything at all. I believe that the troubles that we are going to have with artificially narrow intelligence and AGI are going to be far more than enough to do us away than having to expect the fraught situation of superintelligence.
Yeah, thank you so much for being on my podcast. My name is Alex, and do you have any last words before we end the podcast?
Yes, I would like to make a call to action to everyone, young and old, in the West or the East or anywhere in the world, to actually think very carefully about these things and understand that the reason why a treaty that will control artificial intelligence and its proliferation needs to take place is not because we are being Philistines or Luddites and we are against all kinds of progress. Artificial intelligence can help us in our progress, but the way that the scenarios are stacked against us now, this will end up to our detriment. And I want everyone to think about it and pressure their representatives, their governments, their friends, their families, their peers to actually start contemplating this as the essential next step.
Yeah, thank you so much for being on my podcast again. Bye.
My great pleasure. Bye-bye, Alex.